Hey folks, this is Troy Thompson, and I just wanted to break in here. Now, as you know, we are not monetized. However, you can buy us a coffee. There'll be a little emblem that says you can support the show on whichever platform it is that you are listening to The Sunny Side of Life, and I would be darn honored if you bought me a coffee, so to speak. Or, I think the emblem, I changed it to a beer, which seems, to be honest, probably more appropriate. So buy me a coffee, buy me a beer, whatever it is, and that helps support the show so we can continue to develop more and more great skits and have more and more great conversations just like this. And if you do, great. If you don't, that's just fine too. Just wanted to let you know. Now back to the show. I'm Troy Thompson. Over the last 15 years, our family has worked hard to create a place we call the center of the universe. A place where our kids and someday our grandkids can come home to and laugh, have fun, learn how to work, pray, worship God, and be a place to celebrate life with all our friends. After a quarter century in uniform, I put away one set of boots for another, working on our acreage, improving the land, fixing some structures, and building new ones. We say, give back to the community, be useful, keep your hands calloused, and spread the gospel. This is a little place in a little state right in the middle of flyover country, from which cries out a voice in the wilderness to all who might want to listen, learn, and laugh along with us. This is our American dream. Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to Sunnyside. It's great to have you with me today here again on a Monday and listening to conversations here at Sunnyside that we're about to have, and I can't wait to introduce my next guest. But before I do that, I do have to make a correction, just a quick little correction for everybody. From last week's episode, I have to let everyone know that I am aware that when I said Hong Kong, I meant Taiwan. I had a presidential moment, and I'm allowed to do that.
4 more years. Pause.
4 more years. I got my foreign policy wrong, and I meant Taiwan. I said Hong Kong a couple of times, but I meant Taiwan. Now, with that geographical correction, we head into this new episode this week with a wonderful public speaker, an author, a life changer in so many ways, and her name is Detri McGhee, and she comes to us from a place called Star City, Arkansas. Detri, welcome to Sunnyside.
Thank you, Troy. It's wonderful to be with you.
Well, we love the apparent. You probably don't think you have a Southern accent, but for those of us up north, it is apparent, and we love it.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I don't have the accent. A lot of you Northerners do, but
right.
That's okay. We love it too.
Oh, good. Good. Star City, Arkansas. Not a very big town, south of Little Rock quite a ways. And how did you get there? Are you from there originally?
Actually, yes. My father was born and raised here, and most of his life was spent here. And so I was 2 years old when we moved back here from northeast part of Arkansas. And so I've been here ever since then, except for 5 years with that. I lived with my husband in England, and but that just happens to be England, Arkansas.
Oh,
it's no big deal. My mother was actually born in Paris, Arkansas. So we have a history of, foreign.
Yeah.
Living in foreign places.
England and Paris. That's great. And you're in Star City, and you're that's tremendous. I did notice because I didn't know where Star City was, but Star City, Arkansas is in Lincoln County.
Yes,
and
it's
this county seat of Lincoln County.
It is. It's
That's
a
right.
small town of about 2,500 people.
Nice.
Depending on what month you take the census. And it's a very wonderful place to raise a family. We have a good school system and some very, very nice people. And it's very quiet. But we do get to Little Rock pretty often. It's only about an hour and a half away. And
yeah.
That's, so we're close enough to a bigger place. And I love going to New York City to visit. Our youngest child lives there.
Okay.
And he and his family. So we do travel a little bit. I know in Arkansas for being hillbillies. But,
oh, no. It's middle of the country, just like Iowa. And flyover country, I guess some people think of it. And that's okay. We can go anywhere we want and see those places and then come home to a nice, peace and quiet place.
Exactly. That's what I love about it.
Well, Detri, the reason one of the things we're going to talk about today is your expertise in criticism management, the CAT that tames the dragon. And we're going to talk about ability to handle criticism, anybody. So everybody can learn from this, right, Detri?
Exactly. I say it's good for everybody from birth until till death. It's just pretty much a topic we're all going to face to one extent or another. And the sooner we learn to deal with it positively, the better off we are. We're criticized from the moment we're born.
Yeah.
We come out of the womb and they slap us. So, they're saying something's wrong with you. Straighten up.
Right. Yeah.
It begins early. So let's just deal with it early and make it worse against us.
So you've been working on this book for a while. You've been obviously working in this field. Tell us a little bit about your background and your profession and professional experience and all of that stuff. Listeners would love to know.
Well, I was an insurance agent for New York Life for 15 years. And then I left being my own boss and went into the corporate banking life and worked for a wonderful mid-sized bank, which is now a large banking conglomerate, Simmons First National Bank, the trust marketing officer. So I had the corporate experience. I began dealing with the criticism management issue, though, strictly for my own benefit, my own personal growth, because a female who tested out as on the scale of the quadrants, would divide you into 4 different personality types. I was so far at the lower left-hand side on amiable, that I was really too nice for my own good.
Okay.
I cared too much what other people thought. I was too affected by their thoughts, their reaction to me. And so I had a lot of growing up to do. I think that God has a very wonderful sense of humor. He put me into the insurance business. And what is harder and more criticized than life insurance? Dealing with life insurance, health insurance, and those issues, not the liability side, where everyone has to have that, so you're an okay person if you deal with that. But I began thinking, my first title for my notes I was taking was, I want to learn how to crucify, to kill, to get rid of criticism. And the more I worked with it, the more I realized that's not a possibility. Because if I could control other people, I do that. But since the only person I can control some of the time, not even all the time there, is myself. So I have to deal with it in ways that I can deal with it. Someone said, you can't change other people. And I think that's very true, but we can change the way we react to other people. And so that was the stance, the way that I was coming into the issue. And so for many years, this was just kind of a thought I had that I would take notes on and gather quotes, things like that. One time I sat down and thought of what else is related to criticism, what other problems people have. And I came up with a long list. I just called them the relatives of criticism. And one of the top ones today is, of course, peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're in a society that the right to criticize everything without even thinking of the consequence. We do have many choices we can make, but we can't choose the consequences. So we need to learn to make those choices and thinking of what the consequences before we actually put that choice into action. Most of the bullying has to do with criticism. They're going to take us down. Negativity, teacher gives you a bad grade. When that is criticism. The news where people are murdering other people because they got upset with them over something that's not really important. So I began working on that just in my extra time. One day, I was going to a Life Underwriters Association meeting. I was the secretary for quite a few years. And this is the association of all different insurance people from many different companies that meets locally once. And our goal was to have a good speaker every month so we could build our membership up. Our speaker didn't show up. So the vice president said, Detri, criticism management. I said, I don't have any notes with me. He said, you've got a little blip on the back of that card you gave me. And I said, well, yes. But so I got up and shared it. About a 15-minute talk. We called him our Papa. Papa Bill was everyone's favorite older insurance agent that we all relied on for wisdom. Came up with tears in his eyes. And he said, Detri, I wish I had heard that 50 years ago. And I said, well, okay. And then he said, when you said this and that and the other, well, Troy, I didn't say that. So he heard something that I said that affected him in his scenario, in his part, his life. And the wisdom he gave me and the insight he gave me from that made me realize I really need, if I'm going to use this at some point to help other people, I need to do more research, not just from my point of view as a former amiable person. I need to research it and see how other people feel. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do more of now is to meet with smaller groups or individuals and just hear them. What kind of criticism have you gotten that it was hard to deal with? How did you handle it well? How did you handle it not so well? Looking back, what do you wish you had done? So adding more to that, it's just grown into more of a material for a book. I have the book about probably 90% complete, but I do go around now and give talks and workshops on it with businesses, schools, groups, whatever, but mainly I think that to just help us see that criticism is just a lot like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. My husband could say to me, are you really going to wear that? And I'm like, that's what I say that because he's not personally critical. And that all he did was say, are you going to wear that? He didn't say you look terrible. But that's what I heard.
Right. That's what, yeah, right.
And it's what other people hear and what we say that we need to pay more attention to, not just the words that we choose to use, but the attitude. I don't know, Troy, if you've heard or seen this recent research that a bunch of psychologists and social workers put together, and they researched, is it more important to get negative out of your life or put more positive in?
I haven't seen that.
And I thought it was quite interesting because my first thought was, well, we just need to be more positive. And then I thought, before I answer that, because I had to answer it before I could go to their answer, I couldn't make my mind up because it's very important to put positive in, but is it more important to get the negative out first? And the picture that came into my mind, suppose you've got a beautiful crystal glass with crystal clear water in it, and someone offers it to you for a drink. You usually won't have, but what if right before they gave it to you, they dropped a little piece of chicken droppings into the glass?
Yeah.
How excited would you be to drink from that very expensive crystal glass after that?
Yeah, I wouldn't be that interested. No.
Me either. So I decided maybe they were going to come back and surprise me and say getting the negative out was more important or reducing the negative. And sure enough, that's what they did.
Right. Because you could add more water, but you'd still have chicken poop in there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what if you took that glass of water and you poured it in a bucket full of absolutely beautifully clean, pristine water, but you added that little cup, but it was negative?
Yeah.
You still wouldn't want to drink.
No, that's exactly right. That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. So we got to get the negative. Got to get the negative out. Get the negative out of ourselves, our perception of ourselves, or or how we perceive other people's negativity towards us, or all of the above.
And how we treat other people. I imagine a man coming home from work, or it could be a woman. I don't want to be sexist here on this, but let's just say a man comes in from work and he comes in, opens the door, closes the door behind it, and says, Hey, I'm home. How's everybody doing? Friendly, nothing, no problem.
Yeah.
Suppose he comes in, he slams the door, and he said, I have had the worst day ever. I am so sick of this job. And he comes in with that negative attitude. Everybody's attitude gets negative.
Yeah. It's
You
contagious.
feed on. It is very contagious.
I've noticed
Worse than
that.
COVID, huh?
Oh, well, yes, obviously, but they have, people, in the workspace environment. They, you get one negative person, or on a team, a sports team. If there's one negative person, it does kind of create a cancer for the whole organization. In a short period of time, you can go from a pretty upbeat, enthusiastic group to a woe is me place. Yeah,
Exactly. Well, how often have somebody comes up to us and says, oh, what's the matter? You look tired today. Oh, I'm so tired.
Yeah. Now that
I
you
wasn't
mentioned
tired
it,
till you said that. I didn't
yeah,
realize how exhausted I am.
right. That is correct.
So we have to be careful.
And I like how it's. You said, well, you said you call him Papa or whatever, but how he had heard something that he thought you said, because he was perceiving what you said as important, and he heard a good thing from it, and he brought that back up to you. Say, I didn't say that. How we hear things is a good. That's a great indicator of how we're feeling. I'm looking at a conversation that my wife and I had recently. We're going to build a raised garden, and so we're bringing up, we're getting a raised garden, putting that together, and I've done some work. And so I had, knowing that we were going to do this, I said, well, I know where it's going to be, and I know what has to be done to prepare the site. So I was preparing the site for it. And then I thought, well, we don't, I had a plan earlier, but that plan has changed. So then I spent a little bit of time putting this plan together, and what it might look like, and how I might build it, and what I would use, and dimensions, and all of that stuff. And then I shared that with my wife, and I said, well, we'll put gravel in between the raised beds so that we'll have a nice clean space to walk on. And her comment to me was, well, is it going to look like a parking lot? And I immediately was on the defensive, because I was like, a parking lot? That's a terrible image. Why would it look like a parking lot? And I assumed I thought it was based on a plan which she had not seen me drawn out. I thought she was talking about the way in which I would have arranged the raised beds themselves. That did, in my mind, when she said that, strike me as, well, yeah, I guess they are all in line, and it does kind of look like a parking lot for just a bunch of cars parked in a spot. And so we went back and forth about this, and I was like, well, you didn't have to be so negative or whatever. And it turned, what we got out of the good conversation, by the way, was she didn't mean how I had arranged where these beds would be or in what position. She meant, if a bunch of gravel is in that spot where our yard was, is that going to look like a parking lot?
Right.
In which I said,
and that's just a thought that popped in her mind.
It would look like a parking lot. And we had talked, many months before that we were going to have grass in between there. And she was still on that page. And so she was hung up on the gravel, not on the arrangement. And I was hung up on the arrangement. And so, but if that could have gone a completely different direction if we didn't continue to converse. To find out what it was.
That is the key word, isn't it? Communicate.
Yeah.
That is such an important word. I'm working with putting books in the hands of our second and third graders in 15 schools here locally, and trying to get it done before the end of the school year. So, and the books are not here yet. So I'm holding my breath on that just a little bit, but it's just a children's book that for the second and third graders, and trying to help them learn how to not just read better, but comprehend and imagine and think. And, it's to me, part of what the whole thing with criticism management is not to focus on the criticism, but to focus on the possibilities of the profit that it can bring us, not money, although it can in some places increase our income when we have a positive look on things, but to increase the value of the conversations we do have and the relationships we do have. I think so much of the choices that we have to make every day. How many choices do we make every day from the moment we get up? When we wake up, do you jump up? Do you lay there? Do you go back to sleep? We start our day making choices, and the day, how it goes, depends a lot on those choices. So I like to think that as we mature in our handling of criticism, many of those choices just become habits, good habits, and we don't have to think about how we view things. It's just the way that we are after that point. Nature abhors a vacuum. So we're talking about this removing the negative. If we remove the negative, we need to be standing by with positives to put in the place.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't, other negatives are going to try to jump in there. So at the same time that I'm working on removing negatives, I'm replacing them with positives. For instance, don't tell him, and I know this is just a private conversation between me and you,
Right.
but there are a couple of things that my husband does that kind of bother me. And even though he's perfect and I'm not, it's all my fault. But that's another story. I started, after working on this, and this is fairly recent with me, even after 40 plus years of working on the concept. When he does that, and I realize he's done that again, I say, Lord, thank you for my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And try to focus on, and then in my mind, I start naming 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever it takes until I can get out of that negative attitude, things that I'm so thankful for. We've been married 56 years, so I'm thankful for that.
Wow.
We both are still living. And I used to tell people I was married before I was born, but that's not really working anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's 56 years. That's a great accomplishment. Obviously, you must like each other a little bit.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
But what we do even more than that, I think it's absolutely awesome when a couple likes each other.
Mm-hmm.
But you can love each other and love everything about that person that you don't even like a couple of the things they do.
Right.
Like is a kind of you don't really have a choice sometimes on things people do, whether you like it or not. But love is a choice.
Right.
Acting in love is a choice, real love. Well, I was just thinking about this thing about the choices that we make. It's important, I think, that we teach ourselves and our children to carry every potential act to its logical conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think about things before we act on them. I love the story of the photographer that went on safari. And he wanted to get pictures of the massive bull elephants with the big, huge tusks that curve up. He wanted to get so close he could see the bugs on the skin, if there were any, and the wrinkles. And so he kept inching closer and closer. And the guide kept telling him, no, don't go any closer. They're docile animals for the most part, but don't get in their space.
Mm-hmm.
And he got too close. The bull elephant turned and charged him. As it got right to him, he threw his camera to the side and he grabbed the tusk of the elephant and it pushed him to the ground. Well, the trunk knocked the wind out of him, but the tusks kept it from crushing him. So as he lay there, pretty much wind knocked out of him, the elephant realized he was no threat. He wasn't moving, so he lumbered off and left. When he finally came to, the guide said, Donna, how did you know to do that? That is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And when he got where he could talk, he said, because I have been charged by bull elephants 1,000 times in my mind.
Mm.
So he had faced the possibility of what could happen in certain situations, whether it was work or family or anything. And he thought it to its logical conclusion and came up with the best scenario and a way to get to that end that he would like to have happen. So teaching our children and ourselves to think for ourselves, to think things through, not just to act. I think that how we react to things tells more about who we are inside than how we act. We can put on the act,
Mm-hmm.
but your reactions pretty much fly out of you, whether you want them to or not. And so if something you want to do at that moment is something that you don't really want to have done in your past, then that's a red flag. Don't do it.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
because what we do passes quickly, but what we have done remains with us.
So how do you, one of the things that you try to do, and clearly you're trying to get that book out to the area schools and beyond, about handling criticism and that type of thing, but teaching our children how to handle criticism. How can parents do that? How do teachers do that? And I know that's a big subject for you, the essential skill of teaching how to handle criticism to children so that when they become adults, they are better balanced and emotionally prepared to deal with the world. And then, teaching the current adults to catch up.
Exactly. Um, Let me clarify something I didn't at all make clear up front. The book that I'm distributing right now is for a friend of mine. It's a little book called The Wonderful Bowl.
Okay.
And it's targeted to second and third graders, and it has a lot of little life lessons in it that are awesome. And that's why I haven't gotten mine out just yet. We've been working on this. So I'm anxious to finish up May having that project so I can finish up my project and get my book in print. But it is something that I want to bring to a child's level. But I think one of the best ways is through storytelling. As far as my responsibility is to help children through telling stories and help them understand that what they think about someone telling, help them understand it's okay to fail. Failing is a part of life, and now we just tend to too often be so ugly toward our children when they fail. We shouldn't be that way. Failing is a part of life that we need to learn to overcome, not accept it and say, oh, that's okay, I failed, no problem, but to understand that it is a part of success. Nobody ever succeeded without failing first.
Right.
Ever.
And storytelling helps accomplish that, where you have.
It does.
Yeah.
If we can, I tell one story in one of our longer sessions because I love stories and how they teach so many lessons without actually sitting there and having to point your finger at someone and, you need to do this. My grandmother, I was about 7 years old, and I was at my grandmother's house, and my aunt, her daughter that was still living at home, had pulled out her jewelry box with all kinds of inexpensive but glittery, beautiful to me as a 7-year-old jewelry. So I was looking at it and I started pretending I was a pirate. And I found these jewels and I was going to put some in my pocket and I was going to take them and sneak them out away from the pirates, and I would be rich. And so I was picking just a few and putting them in my pocket. Suddenly, my grandmother said, I cannot believe that you would do that. I can't believe that you would steal from your aunt. And I was just, I couldn't even speak. I couldn't defend myself.
Yeah, because you definitely look like you were stealing. Yeah.
It did. It did. And nothing I could think of or do. I mean, I was just frozen, and I put it back up. And it's bugged me all my life because there is no way to prove that I was really a pirate.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't stealing from her. I was a pirate, and I was never intended to actually take it with me, but she was convinced that her granddaughter was going to be a thief if she hadn't caught her.
Yeah.
Broke my heart.
Oh, it would have. And you don't want your grandma to think of you like that for sure.
No.
Yeah, that's very
But
sad.
There's no way to prove that you didn't do some things,
to
prove the intent of your heart.
But Grandma, I'm a pirate. Well, you didn't know what to say. At the time, you shouldn't to communicate that skill. It's like, I'm pretending I'm a pirate, but then it sounds like you're really a creative thief. It's like, no, I'm just not doing anything here. What a great little storyteller. But isn't that how stories are a good? I mean, telling a story helps achieve that goal, and that's how. I mean, Jesus taught in parables for the same reason, and sometimes his disciples didn't get it. But then even when David is approached about sleeping with Bathsheba, they tell the little story of like, oh, this guy, rich guy had a lamb, and the poor guy had a lamb, and when they went out and the rich guy took the poor guy's lamb and sacrificed it instead, and David said, not in my kingdom, I will I will bring justice to this man, and they say, you are that man, and then then it sunk in completely how guilty he was. But we're not wise enough, as a child, you're not wise enough to convey the story of being a pirate, and as an adult, it's like, man, I would love to think of the right thing to say to be, to show someone maybe that
the heart.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I can't think of a good parable right now.
Well, what would have been even more astounding would it be if my grandmother had the wisdom to either stand there and watch for a little while and see what was going on, or to say, hey, what are you doing? And give me a chance to repent if I really was going to steal. Or, for me to say, oh, Grandma, I'm a pirate. And I these are the jewels I'm going to take back to my home. I'm going to put them back in a minute, but I'm pretending that I'm a pirate.
Right.
Let's assume the best in people until we really know the situation, especially if you trust their heart.
Yes.
We're all going to do things that are wrong. But if I know your heart is basically good and bent toward doing what's good for me, and I remember that when I see something that seems negative or hurtful, then I can take time to assess that a little bit closer and see, and maybe it was hurtful.
Yeah.
And I need to deal with that in my different way too, using my little cat to do that. And it's so important that the less judgmental, the more we enjoy variety, the less the less easily we are offended ourselves. All of those things help us handle all of these situations in a much better way.
So,
one of the things I ask people is, how well do you handle criticism and rejection? I asked that to a group of tellers that I was training in a bank, and their boss was in the training too. After it was over, we had a criticism. A evaluation form, and they filled that out. And I asked, is there any other place that you think this might be helpful for people? And his response was, just about anybody could benefit to this, even though I didn't find a lot of it useful because I don't have a problem with criticism.
Okay.
Well, it was the bank I worked at, so I kind of knew that wasn't exactly how the tellers saw it.
Right.
So he didn't stay for the pizza and conversation afterwards, but after it was over, I heard them speaking among themselves because he made that comment kind of out loud during part of it, and they said, well, so-and-so will need to be here worse than the rest of us. And you can't offer him even a suggestion. He'll write you up. And so I thought, maybe the better question is, how well do you handle criticism? Maybe the better question would be, how well do other people think you handle criticism?
Right. So you mentioned CAT. So let's talk about that. You've got a plan to manage criticism or to handle it. They call it the CAT strategy, or the CAT, that tames your dragon, and that's of course what your book, when it comes out, is going to be about. But you've got the strategy outlined on your website, and which is criticismmanagement.com. And can we talk about that? So you've got, what does the C, the A, and the T stand for, and how does it apply? How do we apply it to our lives? And that's, I realize that's a huge question, isn't it? But
it is.
So if
it takes about 5 hours to go through the whole process.
Right.
Well, no, it's really very simple. I came up with first of all, as I mentioned, the name. It was This Cat Slays the Dragon.
Okay.
Because I wanted criticism slain. I didn't know what to do until I realized if I had a real live dragon that I had controlled with just a little effort, would I be wise to kill it, or would I be wise to tame it? So I thought,
Yeah.
I believe taming a dragon would be much more profitable in many ways than killing it. And I came up with this because I like things that are easy to remember. And the older I get, the more I love things that are easy to remember.
I'm with you. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you ask someone, well, I want you to just close your eyes and envision a cat. And I want you to write down a little few things that describe the cat that you see. People may see, because especially if they've looked at the cover of this and know we're talking about a cat that's got a lion on the front, they may think, cat from the jungle. They may be reminded of a kitten or a big tomcat or a black cat or an orange cat or, all those different things. And I like the fact that it could be looked at many different ways. Then I also like that cats usually land on their feet. You can drop a cat from right almost at the ground and they'll land on their feet and they're ready to rebound. So I thought that's a good quality. I like that. They have 9 lives, so they have many chances, or they're said to have 9 lives. So there were a lot of things about the CAT, and it just happened to fit with the way that I help people analyze this. Sounds like a long process, but it's much like learning to play golf. When you get up to play golf, if you're a golfer, you don't go up and think, now, how do I put the ball on the tee? I'm not too sure. You don't think which club to use for very long. You just reach in there and get it. You don't think about those things like driving a car.
Right.
You don't get all encumbered with where does the key go? How do I turn this steering wheel? You get in there and you do it. So once you learn these principles, they become a part of everyday working with criticism, and they're not as they're not cumbersome and they're not difficult. But the C is for categorize. So we want to take that criticism and break it into pieces. And we want to decide, is it correct or is it incorrect? Is it true or not? Did you deserve it or is it undeserved? And it helps just to put these in little columns. So, was this something that was solicited or just something that came out of the blue? And was it from a friend or a foe? So you just categorize it first. Don't analyze it yet. Just categorize.
Right. So I'm going to stick on that a little bit there because, yeah, you've really defined it. That's correct. Is what they say true? Is it correct or incorrect? And of course, you have to have some emotional intelligence to be able to adjust yourself and say, well, they are correct. I am about whatever it is they just said about me. That is correct. Or most of the time, people are on the defensive when it comes to criticism immediately because you feel like you have to get your shields up and go to battle. No matter, and some people are so they may know they're wrong 100% that it was correct and deserved, and it's coming from a friend. And they still will throw up their shields just for the hubris or the pride or maybe just for some people, the pure pleasure of being in a battle. Does that sound right?
Yes,
because
you're right.
We want to.
But sometimes you think this is correct, but you didn't deserve it. That criticism was 100% on target, but I didn't do it.
Right.
So that's why it helps to break it down.
And deserving could be timing too, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Because you could have, yes, that is true what you're saying. Let's say, well, if you're at your a parent's funeral and a friend comes up to you and it's and they say, well, your dad, he was a real son of a gun. And it's like, well, you're correct, but this is not the time.
Exactly. Your timing's a bit bad.
Yeah. So maybe not. It might be deserved, but maybe the timing affects and turns it into the undeserved. And boy, how many people are honestly soliciting criticism besides history professors who have written a book about underwater basket weaving in the 5th century and, are like, what do my peers have to say? And, who is, that's something we're not very skilled at, just anybody. Just say, well, what do you think about me? Or what do you think about this that I did?
That's one thing I think that our businesses could really, our corporations could really benefit from. We used to have suggestion boxes,
Yeah.
and you could anonymously give them. But to me, I think it would be, I've heard of businesses in the past where the owners would solicit criticism. What can I do better to make your workplace better? Most of us, whether we're the boss or the janitor, don't have the intestinal fortitude to put ourselves in that position.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's difficult to hear that you're not doing well. That there's room for improvement. But what an awesome thing when someone can feel like they can give you honest feedback. I visited with an incredible retired bank CEO recently, and one of the things that he wishes that he had done a lot more of is to just what you said, solicit those opinions and listen more. The flips, of course, they don't have time to just sit around and listen to other. They have a lot of daily have to get done things, so it's not like you can every day go around and ask people to tell you what to do differently.
Right.
But there should be a time that we set aside and actually brainstorm. Sometimes the janitor could give us wisdom and or ideas of what to do that could save businesses thousands of dollars or
Right.
make them thousands of dollars. But and another thing too is sometimes it's the way it's delivered, the way the criticism is delivered. It could be from a friend, but it feels like from a foe because this friend has needed to tell you something for a long time. They won't have the nerve to do that until they just can't take it anymore or the situation is critical and they explode. And so then we think, boy, they've got a problem with their temper. And it could be, we need to take the criticism and detach it from the way that it's presented. A foe might criticize us. I think our people running for elected is they need to listen to what they're being criticized about because they could take that and turn it around for good, which they probably do. But even a foe can give you feedback. I loved what I heard. A woman who had started politicking with her husband for him, and he's running for office. And this woman stands up and questions her, and she says, "I just want to know. I hate your husband. He's this, and really criticizes him." And she said, sometimes I hate him too, but he's still the best man for the job. And I thought, wow, she turned that around. And how wise was that? Rather than saying, "Well, you just need to shut your mouth, woman."
Yeah. Wow.
So let's acknowledge that criticism and that it might have some validity. However, think about this.
Yeah. Well, and that's how you get to the analyze part, the A of the CAT strategy.
Right.
Is,
so what we do then is when we're just putting this in those little pockets, we don't take time to analyze it. We just put it in the pocket where it goes, under the heading it belongs. And then we come back and we take each of those and we dissect them. And we say, we want to be honest till it hurts. I've found one of the best ways is to pretend that I have given that criticism to someone else and how I want them to profit from it rather than hurt. Hopefully that's my goal. But sometimes that helps me in analyzing it. And it may be partially correct, partially incorrect. Same with deserved or solicited. Sometimes we had a lady once that painted her house blue. And at church, she told the pastor my new blue house, which he thought was kind of atrocious, actually. And he said, "Yes, I did." And she said, "Well, what did you think of it?" Well, not wanting to flat out lie, he said, "Well, it looks nice and fresh, and the only thing is, the most important thing is that you like it." Well, she took that as what it really was trying to not say, "I don't like it."
Right.
And so she hated him after that and did everything she could
Yes.
to sabotage his ministry. And really, I mean, he was just being honest.
Right.
And she solicited it. So sometimes when I ask for criticism or if I ask for an opinion, it's like saw a cartoon once. It was a bunch of cows dressed up like women having a tea party.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ladies is standing there and she says, "Now tell me honestly, ladies, does this dress make me look like a cow?" Of course, it wasn't the dress that made her look like a cow.
Right. Wow.
But sometimes we ask for things and we don't get the answer, and then we get all offended and lose a friend over it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it requires honesty with yourself. Like you said, you have to be honest with yourself till it hurts. And people are not just willing to. We live in a society, I think, that in a world that is not particularly new. I don't think it's just 21st century. I think it's been like this probably since Adam and Eve left the garden. But we're not particularly keen on self evaluation or criticism from others, or opening ourselves up to criticism for others. And it's a lot easier to take an answer. Whether it comes from whether we provide it for ourselves as an excuse, or we're provided an excuse by someone that is in some way over us as an employer, or maybe a politician who can promise us the world and make it feel like it's not our fault. So if we don't have to do any self-analysis, it's somebody else's fault. Like, oh, you poor baby. Like, we live in a world where we're encouraged to do the exact opposite of what you're saying. Don't self-analyze. Just it's probably somebody else's fault. You're probably a victim in some way.
Right. This victim mentality has done so much harm, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So how do you take action? And this is, we're going to come back to some applications to the society in which we live and our children are growing up in, but you have some recommendations of how one can take action with the criticism that they receive.
I came up with 3 possible ways to take action with it. The first one was to ignore it, which is what a lot of us do, and especially in the business scenario. That's one of the things that the bank CEO said. There was criticism or suggestions that he ignored because he was so set on getting his project done. And so you can try to ignore it, but you don't really ignore it, because even now, 25 years after some of these suggestions were given to him, now they're coming back to him and he's saying, "Why didn't I listen?"
Right.
We hear things subconsciously that we don't really often let impact us in the conscious arena. So if you try to ignore it, but a couple of examples I gave was the phone's ringing and you're waiting to hear if you got that promotion and a huge raise. So do you answer the phone or do you just let it ring? You can't ignore it.
Right.
You've got to answer it. You walk in your kitchen and you find that mice are having a party in your kitchen. Mm-hmm. Do you ignore it and say, well, maybe they'll go away soon? No, you need to deal with it. You don't try to ignore that. You just want a convertible, tax-free convertible car you've always wanted all your life, and it's delivered out in the driveway. Do you say, "Oh, I'll go look at it after a while. It'll be there. No need to hurry"? No, you don't ignore things that are potentially very important to you. So deal with it quickly, get it out of the way. Don't let it fester under your skin. Most of the time when we try to ignore it, we just let it bug us for a long time.
Right.
And it becomes
if you
festered.
You do say, don't try this one, ignore it. But I would say, let's say you get criticism that is incorrect, undeserved, unsolicited, and from a foe, you can assess that accordingly and say, okay, well, I'm going to ignore that because that's ridiculous. That's okay, isn't it? I mean, you could, if you've analyzed it appropriately.
Right. That comes in under C.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Under the
I jumped ahead.
Under the action, I mean, under the T, I'm sorry, take action. It's
So
under
don't
the C
ignore it.
part of taking. Don't ignore it.
Ignore it,
Deal
yeah.
with it one way or another. Deal with it,
That's right.
even if it's to consciously agree, which you're going to get to in a minute, but you consciously know immediately it is not something you need to waste your time on. Then take it and throw it away. Get rid of it. And don't let it come back in. So when that criticism comes back to your mind again, don't sit there and say, they shouldn't have said that. That was, because you relive that, you worry, you frustrate over it, you chew on it, and you just get a bad attitude. No, deal with it. Don't ignore it.
Right. Okay.
We do a lot is to get angry, or we decide we're going to get even. One of two kinds. They either get ulcers or they give ulcers.
Yeah, that's right. So we don't want to get angry, but but you're allowed to get angry. I mean, it's a human emotion.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the first thing to realize, what are the first two words of the sentence? I lost my temper.
Mm-hmm.
I lost.
Mm-hmm. So
if we can learn to temper, then we're better than 0.9% of the other people in the world, because none of us really can control it 100% of the time. But the more we control it and the more we understand where it can lead us to, think through to their logical conclusion. Okay, I can lose my temper. I can say, I'd like to say to that person, and that would hurt them so bad, I would almost be getting them for their ugliness. But do you really want to be known as the one who crushed other people?
Yeah, so there is a trend in society, particularly there's a lot of YouTube videos and different things like that where they say so-and-so owned so-and-so, because that's a way for them to get, they're going to own them in a conversation or in an argument or in a debate and all of that. And so we kind of have this fascination with getting even, or people that get angry and then lash out. And like you said, you want to be known as the person who crushes someone. Well, I think that there are some YouTubers who do. I don't imagine that they're ultimately the happiest people in the world, unless they're complete sociopaths, that you wouldn't, that they wouldn't think of the consequences of those actions. But yeah, okay, good. We've got some societal issues we have to deal with. And so to get to the analytical part of it, you say, okay, so you've gone through these steps and now we have to either decide to keep it or discard it.
Okay. So I'm going to keep it or discard it.
Mm-hmm.
And any one criticism might have 20 different parts, and it might have one or two different parts.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can analyze and overanalyze and things like that. But the option 3 is to deal with it. So we're going to either discard it or we're going to use it for our profit. So one time I had this criticism I just couldn't seem to turn loose of, and it was partly deserved. It was more, in my mind, of course, more incorrect than correct, but I was still wrong in some ways too. So I was dealing with this and trying to really understand it. And there was a big chunk of it that I needed to get rid of because my attitude toward it was not good. And I didn't want to carry that burr, that seed of anger and frustration and pain. So I thought, well, how can I do this? I need to. And I read somewhere about taking, write down your pain and go burn it. Set it on fire. And I happened to see a nearly empty toothpaste tube. Now, my mom was a collector. She was frugal, and she found a use for almost everything after its original use. But I never knew her to save an empty toothpaste tube. I don't think she ever found any use for that. So I happened to see this empty toothpaste tube, or nearly empty, and I thought, that's pretty useless. I can throw that away with a clear conscience. So I took my thoughts that I wanted to get rid of, and I kind of transferred them to that toothpaste tube. And I carried it with me to the trash can. And I said, you are not useful to me. You are hurting me. You are harmful. You're giving me a bad attitude. You are out of here. And I threw it in the trash can, and I felt better. Later that day, I went back and passed the trash can, and there it was. And I thought, I didn't really get rid of it. So at that moment, I gathered up the trash, took it out to the dumpster, and put it there, and really got rid of it.
Right.
And so that's what I try to do now with these, is to release it with a clear conscience. But then what I've got left are some precious nuggets that can help me be a more mature person, that can help me act and react better in the future. And I can admit more readily now without being personally damaged when I do make a mistake. And of course, that grows with years of learning how to not only be a forgiving person, but forgive myself.
Do you think that, so to profit from these criticisms, because you can take the seeds of truth, or the maybe it's the whole plant that we needed to be confronted with, and say, well,
True.
this is, I can correct a behavior, I can correct a pattern in my life, or an ethic, or whatever it happens to be, and I can improve in that way because that person's criticism is correct. But if there is criticism coming that is valid, but it is also not it's not who you are. It in the sense, and that can be an excuse too. I realize that. It's like, I'm living my own truth, which is not a thing. So I hear that, but I would say in the world that we live in, and I'm just going to pose it this way: like if somebody were to tell me, is like, well, you don't have the proper views on same-sex marriages or whatever it happens to be, and I would say, well, those aren't my views. Those are the views of my faith as a Christian, and I this is the way I feel, and I appreciate the criticism, but that's not going to change how I feel about my faith.
Exactly.
And so how do you, in a situation where you have, and probably conversely too, I suppose, for folks on the opposite side of that, they're, I think they're wrong, but at the same token, but how do we profit then from criticism? And the world's full of it, with something that conflicts with our moral ethics and upbringing.
Very good question. A very deep question that could be a panel discussion for hours on end, I think. One of the things that I like to keep in mind is that we can always learn something, even from our enemies.
Yes.
I think it was Aristophanes that said the wise learn many things from their enemies. And sometimes it just reinforces why we don't want to believe a certain thing. I have very strong views on abortion. I have very strong views on same-sex marriage. I have friends that are in gay relationships. They are still my friends, so it doesn't mean that I would sit with them and pat them on the back and say, I'm so proud of you for making this choice in life.
Yeah.
And some of them know that I differ with thinking that their choices are wise and right. But and with any kind of issue that can be very divisive politically, I mean, we're in such a high stress situation now with Israel, with our own government situation with the elections coming up soon, and we're in a very tenuous time where we could explode against one another at a moment's notice, and that's what our enemies hope will happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. They're just waiting.
If we could look at, for instance, just diversity, appreciate diversity. In my mind, God has given every human being the right to make their own choices. And I'm not going to try to take away from you what God himself has given you. I will share with you what I believe that he's given me, and I will tell you why. And I do refuse to let you take those choices away from me. at the same time that I'm giving you the freedom to make your choices, because again, they are your choices, but you can't choose the consequences.
Yes.
I might choose to jump off the Empire State Building, and all the way down, I could say, see, I told you nothing's happening to me. I'm flying high. This is wonderful. Feel the air against my face. I just feel, oh, I just can't tell you how exciting and wonderful and joyous this makes me feel. Splat.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I would, if I had a way to draw them in while they're on the way down and keep them from splatting on the concrete below, then I would certainly try to do that. But if I tried to do that and they pushed back and said, no, I'm having fun and this is what I want to do,
Mm-hmm.
they have the freedom to do that. But they don't have the freedom. I do not give other people the choice of ruining my life and my faith and making my choices for me. I have to live with my choices.
Right.
And they have to live with theirs. I can still be their friend up to a point. I mean, there are certain people I can't be friends with, close friends. My closest friends are going to share the majority of my important views.
Yeah.
I have friends who believe differently in the Bible, in things in the Bible, but there are some things that I believe are not negotiable.
Yeah. I think we can be kind. I mean, we ought all, we can be kind to one another, and I think
respectful.
and respectful, and we're certainly not wishing violence on one another, but it is something that we want everybody to agree with us, and we want everybody to co-sign that I am right, that what I'm saying is right, how I am thinking, how I'm feeling is right, and we know that I'm an imperfect person, so I can't be right all the time. But as a human being, I'd like it if people thought I was right a lot of the times,
Sure.
And I think everybody's like that. It's just how we can be kind to one another, but we have to be able to accept the fact that we can also be wrong a lot.
Right. If we can't accept that, then we haven't gotten to a point of having very much wisdom.
Yeah. Right.
And the one thing that I would like to help our children learn is how to question things respectfully, and teaching. One of the things I go back to is another story when I heard when I entered the banking business and was sitting through one of the training sessions, they said, how we teach our tellers to identify counterfeit bills. And they were like, well, I guess you get different types of counterfeit bills and have them familiarized with it. And they said, no, you have them handle the real thing. When they handle the real thing day after day after day after day, when the false thing comes, they will know the minute they touch it, because they may not even know why they know. They just know something's wrong. I had a friend who called it the baloney factor. When you hear something and you say that's baloney, then it probably is.
Yeah. What is the you talk about teaching the kids? What is the 80-20 rule you mentioned? Because I have an idea of what an 80-20 rule is.
My understanding
sales.
of in sales is where I first heard that.
Okay.
80% of the people, 20% of the people do 80% of the work.
Yes.
20% of your products bring in 80% of the profit. 20% of your people bring in 80% of your profit in the work. 20% of the people in the church do 80% of the work.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yes, correct.
So that's kind of the 80-20 rule is, and I've even heard that 80% of the decisions that any business makes are incorrect and unprofitable.
Okay.
And I kind of started looking around at that and began to realize that very well may be true.
Right. So how does the 80-20 rule apply to criticism?
Well, 80% of the criticism we get is probably
not true.
Not something we need to spend much time analyzing.
Okay. Yeah.
80% of it, 20% of it probably has a nugget, a jewel in it that we need to think about just a little bit at least.
Yeah. Now you say, or you have said that we are raising a generation that's unable to think. What do you mean by that?
They watch too much television, too much what used to be television. Now it's their phones, their videos, they play games that tell them what to expect to happen in the future or what will happen. We give them games to play that they ultimately, the goal is to win, but the ultimate end of every game is they lose.
Yes.
They play until they lose. And we're not giving them a chance to find out what's in their mind. The Word of God says, be still and know that I'm God. How can we know what God is when we won't even sit long enough to read 2 verses that tell us who God is?
Yeah.
So we're not giving them a chance. They're bored. That is a precious gift, is to have a time to be bored.
Yes.
That gives us time to think. And it says, the word says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Every person has visions or thoughts or creativity within them that God has given them, but they don't get time to develop those, to think on those, and to have them supported. How often do we hear people, they say, well, I'm going to be a star baseball player. Sure. You're not. Nobody does. Very few people do that. You can't do that. Why not?
Yeah.
Maybe they can't, but they can follow their vision and find that out for themselves, and in the process find out where they do belong.
Right.
It would be wonderful if we would just take away our electronics for an hour a day and let kids put a good solid book in their hand.
Right.
Sit down and
a
talk
shovel.
to them.
Yeah. Or a shovel.
Or a shovel.
Yeah. I have 4 boys. Go out. Let's do some work outside.
Odd that you mentioned shovel. We had a friend who owns a mortuary monument company, excuse me, and he hired a teenage boy to come help him dig the ground out to place a monument in the ground, and he gave him a shovel, and he said, I need a hold of this stick. The boy didn't know how to use a shovel.
Oh, it is a problem in the world. Detri,
this is rural Arkansas.
Well, I had last fall we poured a driveway, but about 9 truckloads of cement came in, and I needed a lot of help to get this done. Now I've poured concrete and know how to do that, and but I'm a part of the Gridiron Club with the local university here. So I said, hey, coach, send me out some players and I'll pay them. And so I got 13 football players from all over the country that play at the local university that came out and helped me do this hard work of pouring a concrete driveway. and I think about 3 of those 13 had ever held a shovel. So I was like, well, I gotta. There's a little bit of education here for you today, guys. It doesn't matter how good you are on the football field. You may be strong and fast, but you need to learn how to work. And so
exactly.
That was a fun day. For a while, it was a lot of work. But those guys still talk about it. They're still talking to me, so that's good. That's good.
That is good.
But I agree with you. I had a conversation this morning. I was taking my youngest son to school. He was going to weightlifting, and now the sun's coming up earlier. So this is about just before 6 o'clock in the morning. And there's things that I notice all the time. And I'm a curious person, so I was telling my son, I was like, "Oh, I wonder, did you notice that this field or that, or did you notice about did you see that eagle over there or whatever?" And he's looking at his phone a lot. It's only a 5-minute ride to town, so we live out in the country. But I said, but there's so many things to look at and notice. And how this is a generation. I don't want to condemn my son. Like, we're trying to teach them, like, look around, pay attention, But I often say, if you ask our kids, this generation could possibly be the worst generation of eyewitnesses to ever have to file a police report because they would never have noticed anything.
No,
They would
no.
never have known if somebody walked into the store or walked out, or they just don't pay attention. And get them off those phones.
They're more likely to have videoed it on their phone.
Right.
But if they don't get that little pinpoint view of it, everything else is out. And not being able to think for yourselves. I have a good story about people being taught to think for themselves, but it's a bit long, and I really can't. I'm almost afraid to tell it because even at this date, the people can be identified, and I don't want to make enemies. So, but it's really important that we learn to think for ourselves. People can tell us things that they don't sound quite right, but we accept them. Someone was once told by a person that they had been accepted for this wonderful, or in the running for this wonderful honor, and everybody was just praying, "Oh, look at this! She's so wonderful, and she's even in the running for this." But if you analyzed what she was in the running for against her qualifications, you would know that there is no way that she would be a serious contender for that. On the scale of they have to have a doctorate to be considered, and she didn't have a college degree, that kind of scenario. But they weren't even thinking that through. They were just going on and praising her and spreading the story about this. And I was like, wow, they really think that's true. And that's true of a lot of things in our society today. People, like our people that are protesting, and they'll put the microphone up. What are you protesting? Well, I don't know. They can't define. They just get caught up in the moment. They want something to be dedicated to be, what's the word I'm looking for, Troy? To be on fire for.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. They want to
and they don't know what. So someone comes along and says, "Take this flag and march with me and shout this phrase." Mm-hmm. And they do, and it feels so good to be on fire for something, even if they don't have a clue what it is they're on fire for.
Right. Yeah, we see that in the what you're talking about with when they interview the protesters and they're saying, "Wow, I mean, these are I thought they were good schools, but apparently they don't teach critical thinking there." And so they are.
They don't want don't want them to think for themselves, right. And the few that do, they want to, silence them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's definitely a part of the keeping the noses in the phones and keeping your eyes on a screen. It's like, just keep your head down. Don't read. Don't imagine. Don't think. Don't explore. Don't ask questions. Just do as you're told. The smartest person in the room is the professor before you. And what is it? Socrates had to commit suicide because he taught the kids how to ask questions of their parents, and the parents got sick of it. How do you know what you know is the root of critical thinking, and asking questions. Expand a little bit more on that. How to ask questions in the right way, so that you can profit, but both parties can gain.
I think it's important just to you touched on it earlier, respect.
Right.
Let's respect the people that we're communicating with. Maybe I can't respect any of their ideology. It's just so far off.
Right.
That it's not something I can respect that, but I can respect them being a human being with the right to choose and with the right to have opinions different from mine. So I can answer them with respect, even though I can't agree with maybe anything that they, are trying to spout. Asking the question, assuming the best, or with the intention of really understanding what they're saying, is important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of the time we ask people the questions, but we want them to hurry up and finish giving their answer because we don't really care what it is. We've got another question that we want to follow up with. Knowing what you believe and why you believe it.
Yes.
I think I was 22 when and had a child, had a baby, before I was confronted with this issue of certain things biblically. It was at a state fair here in Arkansas, State Fair in Little Rock, and they had this table set up in one of the booths set up in the hall, and they were talking about different things biblically that were not really that important, because we can come to God many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
There are many gods, and we can approach, it's really important that you're sincere. That's the most important thing. And so I'm like, oh, that sounds so sweet. And so I'm sitting there and I'm listening to them and I'm getting drawn into the conversation. And then they say, oh, the virgin birth is something Christians get hung up on, but it's not really important. And I thought, oh, well, why not? Because it's there. And then they told me why. And so I listened to them and listened to them. And I got home and I thought, something just didn't click right. So I started studying for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And not just that, but other faith issues. And once I started taking their thoughts and breaking them down and comparing them with what I perceive, I believe with all my heart is the truth, and that's the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Then I began to see where their take on these things, it was true to a certain extent. And it goes way back all the way to the Garden of Eden. Did God really tell you that?
Yes.
You will not die.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't die
not
physically
immediately
right that moment, but they died spiritually at that moment. So he took a truth, played it through enough to trip them up.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, for any listener that doesn't know, yes, it's critical to believe in the virgin birth.
Yeah.
He had to come as a man or to take back control of dominion of the earth. But, those things,
anytime I think
we need to think ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you pointed that out. So something didn't sit right with you. And instead of just taking it for granted or ignoring it or discarding it, you went and investigated it. And that's critical thinking. How do I know what I know? This is what I believe, but how do I know that? And that is not necessarily, you may not get the answer from Wikipedia in the next 5 minutes. It may be a lifetime of exploration, particularly with things of the matter of faith. But those are worthwhile pursuits. And I feel like anytime there's a situation where because it happens all the time. You talk about the virgin birth. That's miraculous. Any miraculous thing in the Bible that can be discounted by a naysayer or even a person who professes to be faithful. It's like, I believe in most of the Bible, just not the crazy parts. And I was like, well, you have to believe in the crazy parts, because if you get to decide all of a sudden what is and what isn't real, or what is and isn't truth, and you're picking that out of the Bible, then that puts you in the position of the author, or in this case, since I happen to believe that the author it's divinely inspired, that puts you in the position of God, and that ultimately is what the big trick always was in the first place. It's like all you have to do is just think of yourself as God, then you can decide what is and isn't sin, what is and isn't accurate in the Bible, and from there on out, the miracles can be explained away in your mind, or if it can't be explained away, it probably didn't really happen this way, and therefore you can defeat faith. And if you can take faith away from people, and faith in the family, and all these other wonderful features that God has given us, well, then ultimately, you do have a fallen world in which we are in, and all kinds of and other problems, and I don't think, to bring it back, full circle, I don't think if you're living in that kind of world and that kind of a mindset, and you're not prepared to deal with criticism, then you can just be beaten down into submission and become a person who is, not happy. You're not a happy person. You're not a faithful person. You're not being what God wants you to be. And so, yeah.
You'll either be destroyed or you'll become a destroyer.
Yeah. And we don't want to be, there are consequences. Take it back to some of the first things that you mentioned. Like there are consequences of criticism to the individual who receives it. They feel bad, or they feel angry, or any number of emotions that may be drawn up from the consequence, I guess, from being criticized. But conversely on that, I'm thinking like, well, we also kind of live in a world where we understand the consequences of painful speech to the people that are receiving it. And part of the problem is that there isn't consequences for the people who provide it. No way we live in right?
Too often they are not.
Yeah, we can say whatever we want, and we can. We shouldn't, but we can say whatever we want to whomever we want, and the world will fall apart if, when I was a kid, I would say I was quick-witted. My mom would say, boy, one of these days somebody's going to clean your clock, and there are consequences. Like, you can have a smart mouth, but somebody might take offense to that and knock a tooth out, and we don't encourage that, but it's like, I don't know. Part of me is old fashioned enough to go, well, you say that, you might have to take it outside, buddy.
Exactly.
There's not a world where that's acceptable. So we just want to have this consequenceless world to live in, and that's just not how God arranged it.
No. Well, we're talking about the miracles that the Bible gives us, and learning to understand how these stories are related to us, and which ones are given to us as parables, and which ones are given to us as literal truths. Someone once told me, if you can believe the first 4 words of the Bible, then you won't have trouble with the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I really, with all my heart, believe that, then what is hard to believe about a flood?
Right.
Or the dead coming back to life?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, speaking of the flood, we're in the same boat on that one.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for us to learn to not let other people dictate to us what we think of ourselves and of other people. I had a lady one time that cornered me in the grocery store. It had been a horrible day at work. What could go wrong did, and things that shouldn't have gone wrong did. And it was exhausting. I had to get home I worked an hour and 10 minutes from home at the time. So I drove back, stopped by the grocery store to pick up a couple of things real quickly, get home, take my son to football practice, go back home and start supper, go back and pick up my son after football practice, help him with their homework, do the laundry, all the things. It was one of those days where everything needed to be done that day.
Yeah.
And she cornered me, and she was having trouble with the new choir director that we had. And she was actually giving him trouble more than she was having trouble. But she cornered me and says, Detri, I was the pianist at the time. She said, I want to know what you think about blah, blah. It started in on this situation I was aware of. And she said, I want to know what you think. And I said, and this to me, Troy, this was a God-given answer, because I had never thought this in my own whole life before. But I said, well, what I really think, I'll give her a different name, Miss Sally. She said, no, what? And she leaned in, because I said it kind of softly. I said, I think today I am very, very thankful that that's none of my business, and I don't have to spend 1 minute thinking about it. You have a good day. I've got to run. Bye.
That is great.
And I thought, I got to the car and I thought, oh, she's probably going to be on the phone calling everybody and telling them what a blankety blank I am. And she didn't say a word. And from that day forward, she didn't gossip to me anymore either, which I was thankful for.
Yes.
So, that was God's answer and wisdom that I've used so many times I don't have to form an opinion about everything. And I certainly don't have to even share my opinion about things. Right. In every situation, just because someone asks.
Well, you're no fun if if I can't get you all fired up about some subject matter that's on the news or out and about. How am I gonna move you in a direction I want you to go?
Exactly. How are you going to control me? And that's what people want to do.
Right.
They want to control other people. They want to bring them down to their level, um, or find some way that they can criticize them, hurt them instead of building them up. There are very few people who really, really have the goal of building up other people, helping them find their best, forgiving them quickly when they hurt them. It was quite a revelation when about this forgiveness thing. I found that most people are kind of on one of two sides of things. They can forgive others pretty quickly, but then they are constantly putting themselves down, or they find excuses for themselves and can't admit when they're wrong, but everything everybody else does is wrong and they should have known better and that was stupid and all the other things that they say about them. And I'm the one that I can forgive other people because they didn't really mean to do that, or they didn't realize how hurtful that was, or I can find excuses for other people, but then I would kick myself all the time. And it was so enlightening when God put a scripture, and I'm sorry, I can't even quote it right now, but I can look it up and let you know later. But he put this scripture in front of my face. And it was, if the blood of bulls was sufficient for him to forgive when they were offered on the altar, is pointing to the blood of Christ. If that was sufficient for God to forgive, how much more the blood of Christ is sufficient to forgive even ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, you know what, that's reverse arrogance and hypocrisy. I'm saying to God, my sins are worse than yours. I can forgive you because you're just human, but I can't forgive me because I should know better.
Mm-hmm.
See how that's putting ourselves up on a pedestal?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is.
I thought it was humility, but it's not. It's arrogance.
Hmm. Very good. Well, I have to say this has been a very exciting conversation, and that you mentioned a few times, like we could have a 5-hour panel and discussion on all of these things. And for folks who businesses and organizations that would like to get in touch with Detri McGhee, and because you do provide this workshops, I know that you can customize workbooks for them. You can go through and do all of that stuff according to your website there. What is the best way to get in touch with you? And of course, we'll link it in the show notes as well.
Well, I appreciate that. My website, which has a lot to be desired, it is the process of eventually getting redone, but it does have a good bit of information as well as the outline that they can get all of that information at criticismmanagement.com.
Okay.
And of course, I'm at Detri McGhee at yahoo.com. It's DETRIMCGHEE at yahoo.com. I would love to hear from them, get their thoughts, and would love to have some feedback on ways that they have handled criticism well.
What a great conversation with you today, and I'm so blessed and happy that we have had this opportunity to share with the listeners of the Sunny Side of Life. What a great way to be the sunny side of somebody else's life, to learn how to accept criticism for what it is, to break it down, decide whether it can be discarded or kept to profit for your benefit, to not let yourself become angry and torn down completely, so that you can go and be what God wants you to be. And that's what we try to promote here on the Sunny Side of Life, being the sunny side of other people's lives, being useful, being active, being a part of the community, not having your face in a phone or on necessarily in a screen, but out there doing useful things. And Detri, that's something that you're advocating and making a big difference in a lot of people's lives. So thank you for being on the Sunny Side of Life today, and I'll give you the final word.
Well, it was a real pleasure to be here. I would love to hear from your viewers, and anything that we can do that helps us to become better communicators with one another and helps us to raise healthier, stronger, more self-sufficient children is such a blessing, and always willing to learn, enjoying hearing from people, and to just expand our thoughts so that we cover more and more territory and help more and more people. Thank you so much for the time.
You're welcome. I want to thank all our friends and guests for stopping by for this episode of The Sunny Side of Life. All the Sunny Side of Life players who stopped by, creative support provided every day by my incredible wife Heidi and our fantastic 4 boys. Thanks to every one of our listeners. That means you. A big shout out to my brothers and sisters in uniform holding the line around the world. Share the word, folks. Let the people know what we're up to. Subscribe so you never miss an episode, and follow us on social media. All skits are written or adapted and directed by me, Troy Thompson, and are produced here at Sunnyside Farm Studios and delivered to all platforms by Buzzsprout. Music and sound effects are provided by Soundstripe. The Sunny Side of Life is a weekly production about our life on the family farmstead here in Iowa, the liberties we prize, and the pursuits which make us happy. Now, none of this is possible without Christ in our lives. For the Lord God is our sun and our shield. He gives us grace and glory. So may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may the sunny side of your life, liberty and pursuits, be in Christ, and made evident unto you each and every day, and give you peace.